This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by AuthorU and the Book Shepherd. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of AuthorU, your guide to book publishing. Throughout it, I will share ahas, insights, tips to enhance and support your book publishing journey and book marketing success. And my goal is to always support you and your book. So let's get started. Today, we have a really special guest. Actually, I've known of Brian for a gazillion years, and I'm talking a gazillion years. It would be like, I don't know, 3 decades at least. And New York-based Brian Feinblum. And here's what I know about him from the old days when I was published with New York, and they would bring in publicists to handle it and take care of us and create all the contacts. Brian is that kind of dude, or he was that kind of dude. He does other things now. He is a PR consultant. He brainstorms book marketing. He has a phenomenal, highly recommended you follow this and pull nuggets from it, the BookMarketingBuzzBlog that you can get at. And the website, I'll just give it to you. It's BookMarketingBuzzBlog.blogspot.com. His clients have included from Dr. Ruth, Mark Victor Hansen, Harvey McKay, Ken Blanchard, Jeff Foxworthy, my good close friend Susan Rowan, and a lot of very first time, never heard of, self-published, unknown authors, everything in between. His clients have been featured in the New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, as well as on multiple nationally syndicated radio and television shows. Brian speaks at writers' conferences, and he's presented for several years at Book Expo America, and he publishes in the Writer magazine. So, Brian, welcome to AuthorU.
Oh, thank you so much, Judith. It's wonderful to be here.
So, I always like to kind of start off with, because we're gonna talk about, I think, what it takes. Everyone always wants to know how to market a book. And of course, what they really want to know is who will do it for them so they don't have to do it. Would you agree with me on a... Yes, it makes me crazy. And I always tell them they're the number one person to market their book. Number one.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. Authors love to write, and that's hopefully what they're best at doing. But a close second is the marketing. The books don't sell themselves anymore if they ever did. You need someone there to shout on your behalf. You got to shout on social media, traditional media, speaking engagements, advertising, you name it. There's so many ways to promote a book so the good news is that there's a lot of opportunity out there. The bad news is there's a lot of competition. And, authors feel they gave birth to this book, and they always compare it. So I said, okay, so if your book is your baby, now the marketing side is taking that baby and raising it to become an adult and go to college. So you've gotta take your baby and raise it right. And authors, I think, increasingly become aware of this. They've been told many times, but they still somehow hope they'll get discovered or hope that someone else can do this for practically free. And it doesn't work that way. Or if they're published by someone, they're hoping that the publisher will do stuff, but they're often disappointed to find out later on what it really took to promote their book. So I implore people, certainly, to get the advice and or the help of a book marketer or promoter. Of course, preferably me, but there are many good people out there.
Well, I mean, it's one of the the segments, let's say, when we're taking them on the journey. And I always say the day you start marketing the book is the day you started writing. Okay, if you missed that one, which most of you did, it's today. You're marketing today, going forward in that. And they do miss a lot. And I remember coming from my first publisher was St. Martin's Press, one of the oldies and still standing. And I did lots with Simon Schuster, which is now in the giant merge going on. But
Right.
that they brought in people like what you did for authors. You were for hire. You were the for hire guy and took care of it. And I always said I was a really well-kept author, and it was really cool. But suddenly, about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I think it's closer to 20 years that really the crossover happened, where all of a sudden the author was responsible for the bulk of the marketing. And I think they're still in shell shock, Brian, with that.
I think you're right. Authors work so hard to A, write a book and put it together, and then B, to get it published. However they get it published, whether they found a literary agent and got a traditional publisher, whether they signed some sort of deal with a hybrid publisher, or they did it on their own. But they work so hard to get to that point. And yeah, the traditional publishers, and just to clarify so people know what these terms even mean, we throw them around all the time. There's something like 3 books every minute being published in the U.S. Most of them are published by self-published authors, but even amongst the traditional houses like the Simon & Schuster, which will become part of Penguin Random House, and other imprints that we all know of, HarperCollins, etc., they publish about 1,000 books a day throughout the whole year, let's say 365,000 books. So if you used to get about all the self-published books, which there are a lot of, and other forms of books, just the traditional publishers, that's 1,000 new books every single day, holiday, weekend, weekday, being released. So they can never promote those books appropriately, even if they wanted to. The budget would be out of this world. The publishers work totally differently now than they used to. And you're right, that change probably began 20 years ago, and it just continues today, that they're expecting the authors to do a lot more. And I think that figures into their process of who they decide to procure as an author and to publish. They already want to know in their mind, not just is it a great book, not just is there a market for this book, not just have we done a book like this before, which they look at all those. They want to know, Mr. and Mrs. Author, what will you bring to the table? Are you a speaker? Do you have X amount of followers on social media? Are you active with traditional media? Do you have connections with groups that you think you could already say without equivocation that you'll purchase, 1,500 copies of the book before it's published to give out or to sell to your followers? So, yeah, the world has definitely changed, and the reality is almost all authors have to be involved in promotions, not in a reactionary way, meaning, oh, my publisher will send me on a road trip, which I don't really do anymore anyway, but the authors themselves have to initiate, okay, I'm going to speak at these 6 bookstores. I'm going to go and contact these organizations and do an online presentation. I'm going to go and spend time on Facebook and Twitter and promote this book, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that authors need to do, but that they can do. So that's the good news. Even though there's an obligation, a burden placed on them that maybe didn't exist as many years ago, but they have the resources and opportunities now to do it.
And, I have to tell you, Brian, I was playing around with your numbers when you started the 3 books every minute. So let me do the math. I'm going to take the math out for all of you. If you do three books every minute, all right, so we have a 60 minutes in an hour. You've got 24 hours in a day. That comes up to 4,320 books a day.
That's right.
And I think it may be a little bit more, but what we're talking about is just I believe it's just under shy of, and using your numbers, it's between 1.5 and 2 million books are published every year, and you've got to figure out how to rise above the crowd. That's what you've got to figure out. So
that's right.
That's what we're talking about. So Brian, when you took at that and just thinking about what does it take to market a book successfully, well, I guess first is be aware that you're going to have to market it. That might be the first step.
All
right.
Yes.
What's next?
That's right.
What's next? Where else
The
do
next
we
step
go?
is, yeah, sure. Once you've concluded, as you said, that something needs to be done and that you, the author, need to do it, the question then is, what's your timeline? You start to identify, well, let me take it back even for a second. The first thing you should think about is, why did you write the book in the first place, and what are you hoping to accomplish with it? Because that will really dictate what type of marketing publicity you will do and to what extent. For instance, some people certainly write books as calling cards to get more business for themselves. Let's say you're a business book author or a health book author. You write a book, and you hope that that book draws media attention and people who might become clients of yours, right? Let's say you wrote a book about personal finance, and you make a living of consulting with people on their financial matters. So for you, even though you'd love for the book to be a bestseller and sell a zillion copies, what you really need is to sell at least a certain number of copies so you could use the book as a way to get people to become clients who will pay you thousands of dollars each. So those type of authors, and there's certainly a chunk of them, so their goal is a little bit different in terms of publicity. It's not just to sell the book, it's to use the book as an excuse to get media coverage, as an excuse to talk about their services and their skills and their ideas. Then there are other authors who write books, whether they're fiction or nonfiction, who just want to help people. I mean, hopefully all authors want to help people, but some authors are driven by this, meaning their goal with their book, again, whether it sells or not, whether it leads to clients, if they even have that opportunity, their main concern is, I want my message to help people. I want them to learn from my life experience, my career, whatever it may be. So they're so passionate that that's what they really want out of this. And then there are others certainly who are ego-driven, where they're just doing a book because they think that's the thing to do. They want to become famous and think it's almost their right. And
All right. I want you to hold on that. If there's any of the authors that make me cuckoo, is the ones that it's the ego that's driving everything. But we'll come back with that. With us is Brian Feinblum. We are talking about your marketing success.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Is there a book in you? Or another? AuthorU shows you how to create, develop, and publish your book without being hoodwinked. If you already have a book out, you will find a supportive and brainstorming community that is connected and creative, no matter where you live. AuthorU brings in national experts for its book camps and annual AuthorU extravaganza. It has regular meetings and delivers webinars for its members on timely topics. Through AuthorU's extensive network, members enjoy exclusive benefits, including significant discounts for a variety of services necessary to publishing. AuthorU is the premier authoring resource in the country, creating community, education, guidance, vision, and success for the serious author. If you want to create a book that has pizzazz, punch, and panache, AuthorU is for you. Timely author and publishing tips and articles are posted on its social media platforms, and it is free. Discover AuthorU, where authors go to become seriously successful. Join AuthorU today at AuthorU.org.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
With me today is one of the masters of creating book marketing buzz and PR buzz. Let's get those out because they do go hand in hand. So Brian Feinblum's with us, and I've known him from my old New York stomping ground names. I didn't have the pleasure of working with him. I just have worked with other people on the team, Brian. So you weren't in my life during those times, but I guess the companies were on that. So we were talking about what it takes to market a book successfully, and I think that the question, what are you going to bring to the table, is so important to understand. And also, when just before we took the break, you were going through some of the segments. Is this book going to be a lead generator? Are you using it for your branding? Is your message you just want to help people? Is it your ego tap dancing and you just need your picture and things out there? And I think that's important to understand.
Absolutely. I think once the authors know why they're doing what they're doing, they'll be motivated and it'll be clear in their minds what they should be doing. And I would say authors should make a quick list and have 3 columns. One is, we'll do this in a certain order. Once they figure out what they need to do, then they have to decide who's going to do it. Will the author be able to do it? Do they have the skills, the time, the interest? Or will they need to hire someone to do that particular task? So that's the first thing. Will they do it? Will they hire someone? Or there's a third option. Will they completely ignore it? Meaning, without guilt and reservation, they may say to themselves, okay, look, I don't have the time or the money, or it's not a priority to do whatever it may be. Let's say for them, they want to skip on advertising. They think it doesn't make sense, or there are other things they want to spend their time and money on. That's fine. What I find sometimes, though, is authors, they feel guilty that they're not doing everything they think or believe they should be doing, and they're concerned that even when they hire someone or do something, that something's still missing. And the answer is yes, something's always missing, but they should feel good if they put in the time and effort to do things, and if they work with professionals to help them in areas that they fall short or where those people can do a better job, then you're doing a great thing. So I want to absolve authors. I want them to not feel guilty, not feel like they should be doing something, and yet the truth is, yes, they certainly should be doing something, just not nothing. So what should they be doing? Authors, I think, should look at it very methodically. Certainly on social media, we hear a lot about social media. There are definitely ways to use social media in a useful, intelligent way that will get you what you want. Now, does it always materialize and convert into book sales? Not always, or maybe not to the degree you hope or want. But that also goes back to your goals. So if your goal is not so much, for instance, how many books get sold, but using the book and social media as the calling card to get something else, then certainly, yes, you should be doing social media. If you think you need social media to help you also sell books to become more well-known and branded in your industry, yes, use social media. So I think things can't get painted with too broad of a paint stroke. Some people will say, oh, I don't know about Facebook. I don't quite like their policies on something. Or Twitter, there's a lot of nuts on there. They'll have an excuse for everything. And it's not that they're wrong to have criticisms about any of the social media giants, because they do have some issues. But you've got to just see it as a tool. What's going to serve my purpose? How can I best use it? And if you're not sure, that's when you need someone to help give you some guidance or show you what can be done, or even do it for you. So authors should at least make up a budget in terms of time and money and decide who's going to do what and what's not going to get done, and that's okay. And then they have to have a timeline. You have to work backwards. You have to anticipate, okay, my book is coming out, let's say, 4 months from now, or 6 months from now, or 8 months from now. The more advanced time, the better to plan ahead. So the time to do this is not when the book is first published and you decide, oh, now my book is here. Now let me see what I can do. I mean, yes, you still should be doing stuff when the book comes out, sure. But a lot of heavy lifting happened many months before then to figure out where you might speak and to reach out to people, to send advance review copies out for review, to plant seeds on social media. So it's never too early to start, and it's a never-ending process. Really, people who write, they're basically promoting throughout. It's not just when you have a new book out. It's after the book is out. It's before the next book comes out. It's in between. You're always building your following.
Brian, I actually think the more norm than not is, especially with the independent published, self-published group, is they absolutely don't think about any marketing until I have had them say this to me. I can't think of that until I have a book in my hand. I can't even think about that. And you've heard it too, right?
Yeah, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Look, I wasn't born to market per se, although it may seem that way. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and as you point out in that generous introduction. I've worked with some great people and many people who are first-time authors and self-published authors and all kinds of genres. But I do have a passion for the written word. I originally, when I was in college many years ago, I wanted to be a journalist, and I graduated as a journalism major, and I ran the school paper and all that stuff. And I was a rabble-rouser. I was one of the free speech people and loved to write. But then I realized that I loved books, and I thought my first job out of school was with a small book publishing company, and I learned everything from acquisitions to editing and, of course, to public relations. And I realized that PR and journalism really are similar. You know, they call PR the dark side, and journalism is supposed to be the pure side. And I guess we're learning more that not all journalists and journalism is as pure as we would hope. And the PR people, well, I guess they're still on the dark side because they're always advocating for whoever pays them. But there are some good publicists out there and people who are passionate about what they do as well and trying to promote books. I love promoting books. I could use my skills to promote something or someone else, perhaps things that are more lucrative, but I love helping authors. And I understand the passion of the author. I'm an author myself. You know, many years ago I wrote a book that had nothing to do with what I thought I would be interested in, but I just kind of fell into it. It was a book about homeowner associations, and that's a long story into itself. But through that process, I realized once I became an author, you know, I had the same issue. So what do I do now? You know, and then I realized, yeah, I got to do all the things I've been telling other people to do and that I do for them. And once you start tooting your own horn, it feels weird at first, but then it feels exhilarating when you start to do these interviews or see a book review, or you realize that what you do makes a difference and you're getting that message out. So I really implore all the authors to do what they can on marketing. They can't leave it to anyone else. It's really in their hands.
So if they are, let's say, okay, I get this. I have my column list. These are the things I need to do. Maybe though they don't even know what they need to do. Maybe that's where they need to start.
That could be. So you know, let's identify some of those bigger buckets.
Let's do it. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So the thing that's going to drive sales or attention for your book, some of them certainly I would hope are obvious. So one would be media, and we say media. Let's be more specific. So that's anything from getting a book review to having someone from a newspaper, magazine, a website, radio show, podcast, blogger, having them do a review, do an interview with you. Some sites and publications will offer you what's called a byline article opportunity, where you can write about the topic that you're an expert in, or even if it's fiction, even to write an article based on your book. So any way you can get media coverage for your book certainly is desired, because if it's a targeted media outlet or a big media outlet, you're going to get a certain number of readers and clickers and viewers, and then those people, a certain percentage, even a small percentage, will go to your website and see what you're all about and hopefully buy a book, take an action step, do something. So media is definitely one area. The next area would be, of course, social media. I would say authors should be on at least 2 social media platforms, not 6, not 5, not 4, because you get spread thin and you start repeating yourself anyway. In other words, what you put on Twitter, you put on Facebook. You put on Facebook, you put on Instagram. So I mean, on the one hand, one can say, okay, I could be on 5. You could be on 5 or 6 different platforms. The big ones are Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest. I'm probably missing some others, but those are, you know, the more common ones. The question is, what do you do with these platforms? So some authors get lost on there. They start a profile and go on. Maybe they email some of their friends and family to connect with them, and then after that, they're not quite sure what to do, and that they have to really work at it to post on a certain schedule and to make an effort to connect with more people. And there are certainly strategies, you know them, I know them, that are logical to help people. But social media would be a big area. Speaking is a big area. Certainly depends on your book. Speaking is more useful to nonfiction authors than fiction, but depending on what you write about in your background, there's certainly speaking opportunities of all kinds. Some are free, you know, a bookstore, a library, a nonprofit. Some will pay you. There are speakers bureaus out there. There are other conferences that you can attend. Of course, I'm speaking in the general now with COVID-19 still around. Not much is in person, but that will change. And these groups that used to do in person, some are doing stuff online. But suffice to say, there are speaking opportunities available. Look, I'm speaking to you now. That's a speaking opportunity. If I was an author.
It is. You know, one of the
yeah.
the bigger speaking opportunities I've seen, especially for the fiction folks, is really hunkering down in that to-do list, people, to do, is find online book clubs. I'm going to add this to your list, Brian, that if and by the way, you're not going to get paid. Don't ask to get paid here. But you can do a string attached, dear listener. The string attached would be, I would be glad, here's your line, I would be glad to waive my speaking fee if everyone in the club buys my book before we start, and we'll dig into it. And I'll send you some special questions just for your group and your interests. You can, none of this is rocket science, actually, but there is these hesitancy factors.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the head. I think once you put on your marketing cap, you have to be determined and look at things through the eyes of a marketer. A lot of authors, I would like to think, there's some sort of ethical standard that they have. I mean, I'm not saying that every author is ethical, but there's something about them. They have a little bit more than the average person. They have a sense of right and wrong, or what they're willing to do, what they're not willing to do, and I think sometimes it gets in the way. Like, to be a marketer, it doesn't mean that you have to do anything unethical, but it just means you have to think. They almost work against each other. The writer's about substance and ideas. The marketer's more the aggressive, get out there, showman style kind of person. Substance is secondary. But really, to be an author today, you have to be both. You have to be the creative, substantive person as an author, and use that in some way to become the showman, showwoman marketer. It doesn't mean you have to sell your soul, and you should never lie, and you should never stretch the truth where it becomes unrecognizable. What it means, though, is be an opportunist. Instead of being reserved and shy and waiting for people to ask you something, you're doing the asking. You're the one doing the pushing. It's that extra push in everything that you do. I mean, even in terms of an author brand, and authors have a brand, everything.
Well, you hold on that. Yeah, Brian, hold on that. We're going to take our next break, but let's come back and kiss on branding. And I also I don't want to leave social media totally yet, because let's say what does work for social media.
All right.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, with your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Discover the power of you and your book at the Judith Briles Unplugged events. Each summer, Judith Briles Book Marketing Unplugged unfolds over 3 intensive days working with just Judith. You get publishing strategies, author and book platforms, book marketing panache and pizzazz, and authoring tools to take you and your book to rock star success. In the fall and winter, Judith Briles Speaking Unplugged includes Judith as your coach and mentor during 2 powerful days. You will learn how to structure a speech, how to create openings and closings, how to find gigs that pay you and sell your books, and you will get one-on-one coaching. Go to thebookshepherd.com and click on the Events tab to learn how to participate at the next Unplugged Workshop event.
Congratulations on getting your book published. The effort you put into your work is truly commendable. But what's next? What will happen to all the knowledge you have worked so hard to acquire to produce your book? Here at TogiNet Radio, we can provide you a platform to keep your knowledge working for you through the power of podcast. The subjects our podcasts cover are as varied as the grains of sand on a beach. From life coaching to military resources to business success, even to the paranormal. We have a place for everyone. To get started on your next step, call Scott at 903-787-5880 or email him at scott@toginetradio.com. That's SCOTT at TOGINETRADIO.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Okay, we're talking about your book success and your success. And that starts often with that wonderful word called branding. Branding. With me, my guest today is Brian Feinblum, and he has been in PR for 3 decades, working with some of the biggies, handling huge, successful clients. I'll never forget the time. I mean, I had a wonderful interview with Harvey McKay one time, Brian. And
Oh, yeah.
I know he's one of your clients, and
Yeah.
meeting him when he was passing out sharks. Do you remember that, the very beginning? He had
Yeah.
all these little shark pins.
Mm-hmm.
So,
He's a lot of fun. One of the books we promoted for him was Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And that advice applies to authors. In other words, don't wait until you need something. Prepare ahead of time. And really that will position you for a lifetime of success in anything that you do. So that's a good analogy. But, Judith, I wanted to mention to you, and I do want to talk about branding. It occurs to me, and it's always occurred to me, that one of the things that authors can do is help each other. Sometimes authors may see other authors as competitors or just as someone that really can't help them, that they're in the same boat as they are in. But really, authors, sometimes the best advice comes from authors, the best support psychologically comes from authors, and sometimes authors share resources and real leads and information that no one else could help with but them. So authors should really, as part of their marketing plan, should join some sort of local writers group or a national group. They should participate. They have educational things going on. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to talk with other writers, to either know that they're going through some of the same things you are, and at the same time hearing success stories, and not to hear them with jealousy and envy, but to hear them as, that's my model. She can do it, I can do it. I'm going to see if she'll help me. And you start asking, right?
That's absolutely. Yeah, the second Saturday of every month, and we've been doing it online. I'm based in Colorado. Brian's in New York. So we could do it on my second Saturdays now, because typically I used to do this in my living room, and my house was open. 8:30 in the morning, anybody could show up. I had hot coffee and hot tea ready. It was a free event. It was basically, you can come in and pick my brain. But there was, I always had a flip chart up, and my attitude was, any question, you will not leave here without your question being answered. And I know the answer to most of them, but when there's 20 and 30 other people in the room, there are awesome answers. And it's exactly what you say. It's that sharing, the aha, those insights, and they all share what's going on, what's working, what's not working. And I actually learn a lot more from what's not working, because that will tell me instantly that path you probably don't want to go on, or I can handle that path. But it's the collaborative. And I think that one of the trends, maybe that COVID has created, is more of a collaborative environment. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think of it that way, but that kind of makes sense. I mean, certainly COVID hitting gave the whole nation a feeling of they're in the same boat. They may have come to it from different ways and will leave from it in different paths, but we all have this thing in common that we have to deal with one way or another. And I think you're right, though. I think the process of COVID, everyone came into sort of isolation, and now reaching out socially, online or through email or through calls or whatever it may be. Yeah, that support was needed when everything else seemed like it was closed or went dark or was canceled or delayed. Authors can at least help each other. So, yeah, I think that community hopefully has tightened up, and I think it'll be almost like after a war ends. I think, people will come together, hopefully within the 6 months or a year after all this, and will, it may be a whole new era. Maybe the roaring 20s that will come out of COVID, The industry is doing well overall if you judge it by certain things such as book sales or number of books being published. Certainly there are more authors than ever, and there are more books being sold than before. So that's positive, and that's without being able to do really the traditional in-person events that normally push books. So I think things will only improve after this, or so I hope.
Well, I think they're getting smarter, and I love, I wrote down ASA, authors supporting authors. That really is what's important. Okay, let's talk branding. Let's jump into branding real quick.
Sure.
So, what should an author be doing?
So first thing is
and the why.
Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely.
And the why.
Yeah. And the why. Always the why. Got to answer that why. But they need to know, A, that they do have a brand, and B, they need to know that everything they do exemplifies or represents that brand. So some of it is certainly obvious. It's everything from how you appear, your physical appearance, what you wear, your voice, your mannerisms, your persona is part of your brand. Your elevator speech, your 15 to 30-second speech if you meet someone for the first time and you want the words to come out of your mouth the right way, who you are and what your book is about. Your website is part of your brand, A, that you have one, and B, how it looks and what the content is, how it sells you. And then smaller things, your business card. And you should have a business card even in this digital era. You're going to meet people, give them your card, your social media. Not just what you post on social media, but even your profile, what the thing that you create when you first go onto Twitter or Facebook or what have you. Make sure you update that profile to accurately represent, quote unquote, what your brand is. Where you speak, if you have any kind of public speaking engagement, how you sound in the media, if you put out an advertisement or commercial. Anything you do is part of your brand. And when you're lacking something, it sticks out like a sore thumb. For instance, a small for instance, on every book, cover, jacket, interior book, there are testimonials or endorsements for an author, whether it's for them as a person, this book, their previous books, their job, something. But there's someone, even if it's your mom, that's saying something good about you. There's a testimonial or endorsement. And if an author doesn't have that, let's say on the back cover, front cover, or first page or somewhere, some people they may not think about it, but it's influencing them that there's no endorsements or testimonials. Or if there are testimonials, what becomes more important is who said them rather than what was said. So even though you want people to say positive things, you're looking at the credibility of the people who said it. And that's part of your brand. So every step of the way, you're developing a public image for yourself. So your brand is really, it goes back to that question, why did you write the book and who are you? That becomes your brand. Whatever it is whatever mission you're on, whatever you're trying to advocate for, whatever story you're trying to tell, whatever you want people to do, that's your brand. For me, my brand is simple. I'm a book marketer. My goals of my brand is to try and get more clients, but at the same time, trying to help educate authors because I'm passionate about what I do. So some people it's easy, some people it takes a little bit more thought, but they should not have to rack their heads over it. A brand should become sort of obvious. It's almost like a resume. It's like writing that first line summary. The old-fashioned resumes, you'd write a summary of who you are or what you're looking for. Same thing as an author. Who are you? What are you looking for? Has to somehow be answered in whatever you're doing, saying, or showing.
All right. And I loved it that you mentioned appearance as part of your brand too, because it is how you dress, how you look. If you're going to look like a bag lady one day, that's an extreme, by the way. Unless you're writing about bag people, that's another thing. But
that's true.
And then, or you are, dressed to the nines and you could show up for any red carpet. That could also be part of your brand. But I think what you're also saying is consistency is really important.
100%. I'm glad you used that word, consistency. It's something I always instruct my authors and clients especially when they're talking to the media and on their social media, there has to be a consistent voice. You cannot, every one of us may have there's multiple sides to us, right? We have different passions. Even as a writer, we might write outside of one genre or one subject area, but we need some sort of consistency so that it's not Dr. Jekyll and Hyde, that they don't see you in one instance and think you're this person, and then they see you later on, and it doesn't seem like the two resemble each other. So that's important. But I'll tell you, your brand also is your network, meaning the people that you're connected to and how they represent you or how they interact on your behalf. That becomes part of your brand too. Working, it's a whole other area to work your network, meaning who knows you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, your churchgoers, people you know from the PTA, whatever it may be, however you know somebody, those people eventually you're going to want to go to them and ask them for a favor. Certainly at a minimum to buy the book, but more likely asking them to encourage their networks of people to know about you, to post something on social media, to tell people about the book, offer discounts, buy as a gift, do something. So your brand extends beyond yourself. It's anyone who advocates on your behalf becomes part of your brand. If your cousin describes you in a certain way and it's not accurate, they're inadvertently hurting your brand.
I am so glad you said this. There's an old momism that people will judge you by the company you keep. You remember that one?
Mm.
All right.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
So this is the Brian's version. People will judge. People will judge you by the social media you keep. People will judge you by your networks that you keep on there. So if you're they do.
Right.
I totally believe it. Totally believe it. All right. So we've got like 2 minutes to the next break. This thing is going too fast here. So can you talk about news a little bit? What about the news media today? Are they going to listen to you?
Yeah, good question. So sometimes you turn on the news and you hear, obviously now you're hearing big thinking about COVID or economic breakdowns or there's a war somewhere or whatever it may be. So you hear big things. You have the election and then the insurrection and whatever.
Okay, you need to, you know what, Brian, you're going to need to hold it because he is going to, my guy is going to make me take a break again. So, let's kiss on that when we come back because I think it's really important to deal with what the news is. And then I would love to, before we leave, that kiss on bestseller lists just a little bit. That I will tell you that at one time, my goal was to be on the New York Times bestseller list. And that's when I first started out. I've sold more books. I've sold 1 million books. I've sold more books than most of those people ever even dream of. But I did it a different way. So we'll be right back, everyone.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these.
Are you confused about publishing options? Do you know which printing option is best for your book? Does your stomach flip when you think about selling books? Or do you feel overwhelmed with what to do about book marketing and publicity? Get the answers and much more. Get them and from someone who knows publishing inside and out from both the traditional and independent sides how to make a successful book. You can't do it alone without paying the price. You can spend your money creating a book that turns out to be so-so, or you can create a book that looks and feels classy, builds your brand and platform, and is a success, a bestseller. It is your choice. You choose. If you want author and publishing success, you want Judith Briles as your book coach. Sign up for her weekly blogs and e-zine at thebookshepherd.com. The book shepherding concept is simple. The publishing world is changing, and so must you. You need an experienced shepherd and guide to collaborate with you as you create, strategize, develop, publish, and achieve your publishing goals. Publishing is riddled with obstacles, sometimes nightmares for the author. You do not need more problems. You want solutions. Dr. Judith Briles will shepherd you through the maze and chaos. At times, she has had to step in and rescue a book that has been sabotaged by a publisher, by a publishing service provider, and sometimes even by the author. If you want author and book success, connect with her today at thebookshepherd.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Brian Feinblum is with us, and he has his own PR consulting firm and helps with book marketing as well. And I'm going to give you the secret sauce email if you need to reach him. It's Brian Feinblum, and it's FEINBLUM @gmail.com. And I would encourage all of you to hop on his follow his blog, because it's good, it's smart, it's good, it'll move you forward. The BookMarketingBuzzBlog.blogspot.com. So in our last segment, Brian, that we were just transitioning into what, some of the how-tos and the lists, and I was asking about news media. And then also, I want to know your opinion. Maybe I should ask this first. What do you think really works on social media? I mean, it's not going away, but what do you think that, if we had someone that, and I agree with you, just start with 2, learn those, get those. You don't have to kiss everybody.
Absolutely. The very first thing you have to do, and these are some basic steps, but they're really needed. One, you have to dedicate some portion of your day, it can even be 15 minutes a day, but some portion of your day to social media. The second thing you have to do is commit to posting on a regular basis. Now, for some authors, that means wildly different things. Some authors think if they post once a week, that's good enough. That is not good enough. On social media, pretty much, in my opinion, a daily thing. Facebook, I think you can do once a day. I think Twitter you can do 2-3 times a day. Some people do it a lot more. But you got to have a presence with your posting. But more important than the posting is getting followers and connections. People forget that you don't just post something and hope someone discovers it. The only people really seeing your post, if that, are the people who are technically connected to you or following you. It's wide open for everyone to see, but no one's looking for it. So it generally is going to fall into the feed of the people who are connected. So you have to grow your connections on a regular basis. And there are some strategies. On Twitter, sometimes the simplest strategies, you follow that person, they'll follow you. At least some of them will. But there are bigger strategies than that. I think when you engage people, I think when you have a post that gets people to see that you have something to say. So obviously the posts that you have, they're going to be short. You can't say a lot in them. But if you could link them back to your website, your blog, a place where there's another forum for you to express yourself. If you have a podcast, if you have a blog, those are great things to apply on social media. So it all works hand in hand. You need communication to promote more communication to sell a book. So I don't know if I fully answered your question. I spend hours consulting authors on this, as you might. But the obvious thing is it's not just being on the platform, although that's one part of it. It's being active in a certain way. It's easy to search these platforms for targeted people. You go on Facebook, let's say you write about, your area of expertise is dieting and fitness. It's easy to find people who say that they're connected to diet and fitness. There are groups out there, groups on Facebook that have thousands of members. Those are your people. There are groups that say fans of sci-fi. If you're a sci-fi writer, look for that group that says fans of sci-fi. There's thousands of people on there. Those are the people who might buy your book. You got to be in front of your targeted group of people. So it's not everyone that you're trying to impress, but the people that you think will be the consumer of your book. Go after those people.
All right, and on Twitter you can follow Brian. Can I give your handle? Is that okay?
Sure.
It's the PR expert. All right. So there you go. Handle time. And
awesome.
by the way, everyone, one of the things that I do after a show, when we get close to the airing of our show, that I create a boatload of social media for both my guests and myself, and I use their handles in it so that what he or she will see whatever I am pushing out about them as well. And then they can pick it up and we can play the game together. That's the way I look at it. So,
It is a game. You're right.
yeah, but that's the way you build. That is the way you build, and going
100%.
after those things. Okay, so let's jump on media real quick.
Sure. So there's always going to be something major going on in the news media. This past year, it seems like there were a lot of major things, maybe more than usual. It wasn't enough just to have, a big hurricane or a 100-year flood. There was also the election and the post-election and COVID and everything else in between. But regardless, there's always something. I guarantee you tomorrow there will be a headline, right? It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't have to be that someone gets shot or some plane crashes. There will be something going on. We just don't know what it is. Most of those big media stories don't impact authors, and I'll tell you why. Because unless you have a connection to that topic in the news, which some do, then that's great. So now you have a hook to try and get attention for your book. And if you're the vast majority that do not have a hook to COVID or the election or whatever it may be, then you go after the media that covers your area. So if you're if you write about parenting issues, you have a choice. You can try and pitch a story about parenting during COVID. So now you link to the thing that's in the news, and that's fine. Or you could say, I'm going to have a non-COVID topic. I'm just going to go back and talk about things that parents need to know and do that you normally would talk about in a non-COVID era. And you go after media that's targeted to parenting. There are parenting editors, parenting magazines, mommy blogs, etc. So the good news is that there's lots of targeted media that most authors should be going after. Community newspapers, blogs, podcasts. There's a lot of it out there. The question is, how do you find it? And there are lists and lists out there. There are paid databases there, certainly ones that publishers like myself use, and they cost many thousands of dollars to just get this database. Or you can do your research online. There's lots of different lists. If you search well, you can find a list of, let's say, science writers, if your book has something to do with that. So research skills are important. Some authors can do it, some can't. But the media lists are out there. Finding the right outlet and then find the right person at the outlet. I mean, that's why book publishers like myself exist, is because we already know who to go after. We've already researched this. We've already bought the database. We've already experienced it by pitching them. I mean, that's one of the things that publishers brings to the table, hopefully contacts and knowledge and experience and saving time, because it is time-consuming to figure out what you're doing, put this stuff together. I don't blame authors for feeling frustrated, but I do blame them if they give up. They have to realize, as we said at the beginning of the show, it's definitely up to them. And yeah, so news media is definitely possible. It is more competitive than ever, and each of these major news outlets are more diluted than ever, meaning, X amount of years ago, the Today Show brought in a certain number of people, and now it's like half of that. And you look at any major media outlet, they've all, to some degree, lost or shifted their viewers, their readers, their listeners. But nevertheless, you still want to be in some of these outlets. It's third-party credibility and validation, and it helps you get other media. So authors should definitely be pursuing the media in some capacity.
Brian, do they still have, I remember, because I used to I learned how to pitch myself to GMA and Today and those. Do they still have the bookers that really do handle like books? They used to have a person that's what they do.
Exactly, yes. Sometimes they combine things with books plus, let's say, lifestyle. But there is still, at the major morning shows, there's still people who cover just books. And sometimes it's a pain in the butt because you want to pitch something beyond the book and pitch it as an entertainment story or a health story or a business story. And, oh, by the way, there's a book. But as soon as you mention book, they've now put you into that category of book, and it has to go through that book person. So, yeah, they do still exist, And, look, it's very competitive. The morning shows have always been very hard to get, no matter who you're pitching and what time of day or year it is, because everyone wants that. Everyone wants to have a review in the New York Times. Everyone wants certain things. So the more competitive they are, obviously the harder they are to get. But that said, amassing a lot of small or mid-level media is very whether you get that big one or not, you should still be going after what we call the lower hanging fruit, or even the fruit that's a little harder to reach for, but not impossible. And it's a numbers game. You never have enough. You always have to keep going after the next blog or the next podcast or the next TV show, the next print outlet, because as I mentioned, you're always marketing, you're always promoting, and whether it's this book, your last book, the next book, you just keep putting your name out there. It will help you. Everything you do helps you. You create this record online. If I appear on your show, it's going to show up in search engines for years, and which is great. And then maybe someone will click on it, listen to it, and be like, "Oh, this guy's great. I'm going to go work with him."
Exactly.
So,
that's what's great about podcasts. They have long legs.
Beautiful.
Long legs. And let me just give one tip. We have like 2 minutes here, but let me give you one tip that I think that if you're pitching to national TV, you better be watching these shows. 1. 2, if you stay tuned into it, they run their producers in that. Write them down. That's who that's who I used to direct my letters to or my phone call to and do the pitch. All right. So one last question. Bestseller list. Should you go for it, Brian?
Yes. So real quickly, so there are different kinds of bestseller lists, right? The best known and most coveted is New York Times bestseller list. Then you have USA Today, Wall Street Journal, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, etc. These lists, though, are all based on a formula of how many books get sold in a given week through stores that report and websites, etc. But the easiest way to become some sort of bestseller is to go through Amazon.com or BN.com. That means if you sell a certain number of books in a given day or even a given hour, because those lists are updated every hour on Amazon, you can become a bestseller. So a lot of times we'll hear someone say they're a best-selling author, and if they don't say ahead of time, I'm a New York Times best-selling author, then you know it's not from a big outlet. It's probably Amazon or BN.com. But that's great. They are achievable. You have to work at it to get people to buy the book on a particular day and give them incentives to buy that book. But I instruct a lot of authors to do it and take them through that process. It's a wonderful thing. And once you become a bestseller, it gets more sales.
Then you let people know it. And with that, Brian, we have to thank you, Brian Feinblum. You can find him at brianfeinblum@gmail.com, everyone. And thanks all for being with us. That your authoring and publishing success is always up to you. Please remember that, all of you, in this process.
You can do it.
You can do it. That's from both Brian and Judith. All right, we'll be with you next week. Always remember that your words matter. Let's get them out and supported.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.